You're listening to South Niagara Conversations, a podcast presented by the South Niagara Chambers of Commerce, along with 105.1 The River and 101.1 More FM. Here are your hosts, Dolores Fabiano and Chris Burns.
Good morning, and thanks to everyone who's joined us for our South Niagara Conversation series. For those of you who are tuning in from afar, we represent the communities of Fort Erie, Niagara Falls, Port Colborne, Wainfleet, Welland, and Pelham. We're located in Southern Ontario, a wonderful place to live, work, and play. This morning, Chris Burns, owner of 105.1 The River and 101.1 More FM, joins me as co-host. Good morning, Chris. How are you?
I'm fabulous. Thanks, Dolores. It's Friday and we've made it through another week.
You bet. Fabulous on Friday. I love it. I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, the Small Business Enterprise Center, City of Niagara Falls. They're great supporters of our chamber and of our local business community as well. Chris, this morning, we're going to discuss the major post-pandemic shifts in the changing employer-employee relationship. There's lots of stress amongst our business owners over changing expectations. We have a great panel joining us for the conversation, so let's get right to it. Chris, who do we have joining us this morning?
Well, Dolores, this morning we welcome Vivian Kinnaird, who's the CEO of Niagara Workforce Planning. Good morning, Vivian, and Jhon Canon, Human Resource Manager of On-Demand Staffing.
Good morning.
Morning, Dave. And also, I'm sorry, that was John, and also Dave Bouckenoughe, who's a professor of organizational behavior and human resource management at Brock University. Good morning, Dave.
It's a mouthful, right? Good morning.
It's a great name. So, Vivian, let's start with you. Do you have any data on Niagara's business and how many have actually implemented the return to office mandates?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. Good morning, everyone. Thanks again for welcoming us to this podcast. To cut to the chase, we don't have any immediate data on how many businesses have enacted a return to office mandate, but I can give some context in general on businesses across Niagara. So if you look, latest business counts show we've got about 13,500 businesses in Niagara that have employees, and that's important. So there's a lot of solo businesses as well, but there's about 13,500 that have employees. And we reckon that about 35% of the jobs that are done in those businesses could be done remotely, could be done from home, right? So about 32% of businesses are in sectors that have jobs that can easily be done from home. And, these jobs were being done by home in 2018 at about a rate of 4% of employees. And then, of course, the pandemic shot that right up. Mm-hmm. So we know from labor force data, that between the beginning of the pandemic and 2021, the middle of 2021, over a quarter, about 27% of employees in, kind of the Hamilton, Niagara area, which is where we can distill the data down to, were working from home. And these were jobs that being done, not in areas that have been closed down and shut down, but due to the lockdown, they could continue the work they were doing. But within the broader context of the Canadian data that's available too, up to about, closer to over 35% of those jobs could have been done from home. So there's an indication that in Niagara, in our area, up to 10% of people that could have been working from home weren't. They were still working in the office. So when we talk about a return to office, when we talk about return to office mandates, we're talking about a third of jobs in Niagara that are facing this, and a third of businesses in Niagara that are facing this. So I think it provides some context for the conversation today, Dolores, because also, the return to office mandate is important, but there's much wider issues at play within the labor market right now in the post-pandemic situation.
Yeah, and that's thanks for that, because that does put some clearer perspective around this. So, we had a little bit of a conversation going just before we went live, and John, you made some really good points about the fact that we were really experiencing a labor shortage long before the pandemic. And so can you talk a little bit about that? Because this is not is not new. We're having a lot of conversation around it right now. And I can tell you, last night we hosted an event, and just about everybody I talked to touched on their labor challenges, but this is not new.
Absolutely. We have been dealing in North America as a whole, in Niagara, over the last decade or so with a labor shortage that has affected specific industries. Niagara is very dependent on certain industries, manufacturing being one of them. And there are certain skilled trades in manufacturing that employers in Niagara have been had concerns with when it comes to their labor, not exclusively due to labor shortages, but because of the age of the workforce and retirement. And now with the pandemic, a lot of that retirement happened a lot quicker. So we're seeing a lot of that. But as Vivian mentioned earlier, now there's other industries that didn't have a labor shortage or didn't experience that in the past that are experiencing it. And the pandemic really provided for a shift in the way that employees looked at their careers, the options that they had available, and the decisions that they had to make. And now we had industries that were not dealing with labor shortages in the past, that had to close for a very long period of time and lost a lot of those employees. And those employees have seen other ways to make an income, have seen other opportunities. And coupled with the new training programs that the government of Ontario is offering, now there's other opportunity for upskilling, for better jobs, for better wages, and they're not looking to return to those low-paying jobs.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that, and Dave, maybe I'll turn it over to you. So we had industries where it was basically shut down. They were jobs that couldn't be done from home, couldn't be done in person because of the pandemic. Those folks found other work, and some of these industries now are really left hanging, right? And a lot of it, I think, has to do with shifts and the type of work it was. Those jobs still need to be filled, but what do we do?
There are a couple of things here, right? As Jhon was mentioning, and what we're seeing now is that through this process of acceleration due to the pandemic, we've seen that great resignation, we call it, right? Mm-hmm. It's like we have evolved into a system where businesses have to become smarter in the sense that they have to use person-centered data, I would say. They have to make decisions in functions of personal needs of employees. Because the thing is here, if you think about it as an organization, you can get frustrated about the fact that there's a labor shortage, etc. But at the same time, I have to think in terms of how can I remain competitive, and you have to become more attractive, not only locally, but the thing is, if you think about Canada in the broader world, the thing is, how do you attract that talent? How do you retain that talent? And I think that if you adopt a more Anthropocene approach, meaning that you're focusing on human concerns when you're doing job design, then you create more flexibility for people to join your company. So it's a matter of making sure that you attract the right people, the right talent, right? So I think it's just a matter of changing that mindset in businesses, that we have to focus on the talent that is out there, attract them through new innovative strategies. And there are many ways to do that, of course.
So that makes a lot of sense. But in some cases, so I'll give you an example. We're doing some home renovations. And so we've got some ceramic tile throughout the house that I want it gone and I want it replaced. So we've gone to a couple of different places, and a couple of places have said to us, yes, we can get you the tile, pick what you want. We'll, come out, measure, give you a quote, but we don't install. And we were like, well, what do you mean you don't install? We don't have any people who can install it. We don't have. So, we're thinking to ourselves, well, what good is the tile if we don't have no one who can install it? And I think, we get back to the trades, right? Like, are we just not, are those jobs just not interesting enough, or like, that's a whole skill set that we don't have anymore, but there certainly is a demand. And how do we work with that? I mean, you can only be so flexible in a situation like that. This is the job. These are the clients. This is when the jobs need to be done. So I don't know how much flexibility, you can offer to a position like that.
I think that for that specific example, we are in an environment that was created by the pandemic, where household spending was increased, new construction has increased. So the skill was there. Employers, training institutions were not prepared for that demand increase for those specific skills. So I'm not exactly sure what the growth in household spending has been over the last couple of years, but it has been significant. And a lot of it has gone into home renovation because of the real estate market and the potential there. In addition to that, in Niagara or across North America, we're dealing with issues with housing and affordability and lack of housing. So there's new construction. A lot of those trades are going into that because it's more lucrative, because it's more consistent, because it offers employees certain opportunities that they didn't have before when they worked in those trades. That gig type of work that they had in renovation construction is not as attractive as consistent work with a construction firm that has a project for 100 houses in South Niagara.
Yeah. Can I just, I would agree with what John's saying there too. And I think it links back to the earlier comments that were made about, especially in the trades, and in that example that you gave us there, Dolores, that was a problem before the pandemic, right? And then so you lay on top of that, an aging out workforce in those types of skilled trades. We know from even the demographic data that a lot of people took retirement when COVID across all sectors. But when you think of as John is saying, the huge surge in demand for home renos, for building, where people turned their dollars that they were spending on going out to eat or taking holidays or whatever they were doing with their disposable income, and said, well, we're staying at home, let's make home as nice as it can be. So you would have, in the best of situations, had a disconnect in the supply of demand and labor in that context, but then add on top of that we were already in a shortage, right? So I think from what I can see, I don't think there's a quick fix. Right, but from what we were seeing that's going on across the province, there is a focused attention right now, and a lot of investment being put into training in the skilled trades, especially construction. We've seen a lot of announcements even here in Niagara on Ministry of Labor training and skills development investments. And the interesting thing about that too, from a training perspective, is that there is new thinking about different types of training, who can do the training. How quickly people can be trained. And that's not to say that there's certain trades that take a long time to learn. Absolutely. I'm not trying to say that, but there's other aspects of work that could maybe help solve some of the labor shortages and the pressures we've got by quickly training people up in the more junior positions in some of those trades, So there is attention being paid to it. It's just how quickly the whole system can move in order to meet the new demands and the demands of business. Back to your example too, that tiling company, maybe needs to think about, well, I don't know if they in the past had tradespeople attached to them to do the installation. But for them, it may just be they're going to have to double down on trying to focus on that aspects of their business rather than the sales of the ceramic tiles or whatever it is, or flooring that they do. I mean, and not just let it go because there's no tradespeople available, because in the end, people will maybe make decisions about where to purchase, right?
Oh, it's so true. I mean, the ceramic tile is of no use to us.
Exactly.
My husband is a wonderful man, but a handyman he is not. So that's not going to happen. Jhon?
I wanted to add that there's also been a disconnect on whose responsibility it is to provide that skill enhancement within the labor force. Companies, especially smaller business, have always, not always, but the majority of the time historically, given that responsibility to government, to education institutions, and they're the ones that have the real needs. More so now than before, I see a lot of employers engaging in the development of the skills within their own workforce. That has affected other industries because now they're taking employees from low wage jobs and getting them trained into apprenticeships, high skill jobs, giving a path for a better career. So we're competing for employees with everyone now. I'm not only competing with employees within my own industry, I'm competing with employees within other industries. Also, if I'm a skilled laborer, I have a lot of skill that I've developed. I also have the opportunities to go into other areas, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's management. So we need to engage more our employers and organizations to participate not only in helping develop or communicate the needs, but also providing the training.
That's a great point. So do you think we'll eventually get back to a pre-pandemic workplace environment and schedule? And if you think that is the case, how long is it going to take?
So that would be for those that were able to work from home, right? Like who are, because it does seem that employees are now in control, right? And I think that's what's so frustrating to those businesses who are in that situation. Like, this was the job before the pandemic. A situation happened, but now we need you back. And those expectations from the employee have changed.
Yeah.
And so that's a great question, Chris. Like,
yeah.
will we get back to, what's the future look like, Dave? What do you think?
At this point, I mean, there's not that much data yet available to make those forecasts, but there's some research out there. And actually, I recently read one study in Journal of Applied Psychology. And what they actually did was they looked at Twitter. Okay, so they just analyzed tweets of over 100 million people worldwide. And they were looking at how people were looking at remote work and how the future would look once the pandemic finishes. And the general sentiment was that the idea of the 40-hour work week, this is something that will disappear, because when you look at how people think about it, and you have to look at it from this perspective, from the perspective of the employee, as you said, the power has been shifted towards the employee, right? And some major recruiters are actually pointing out, when people are looking for a job, a big deal breaker nowadays is that remote work part. Because from that survey, it turns out that about 45% of the people who are doing this survey, it turned out that about 25% of them actually wanted to stay fully remote, and about 20% wanted to have remote work about 3 days per week. And this is a major deal breaker, because in addition to that, when they were said, if there would be a mandate to come back to work, how would you respond to that? And actually half of those people actually indicated that they would be willing to leave the job or just look. Yeah, I mean, that's already an indication, I guess, that if you want to retain talent in a time where, yeah, the supply of people is already very limited, I think this is something to be very cautious about as an organization, and think in terms of, can we think about more comprehensive work weeks, more flexible work arrangements, because work-life balance has become more important than ever before for people. And the thing about it is, I mean, I understand the employer as well, because they're concerned about productivity, right? But if you look at it, like at the average numbers, we have to be careful with averages, right? Because the thing is that if you throw everything into a big pool, add up the numbers, averages don't always tell like the perfect truth, because you can have outliers, etc. But the bottom line is if you think about this, if you have this situation where people are going to quit their job and you don't have actually a plan in place to retain them in the future, you might go out of business, right?
Yeah.
So you have to become more smarter as an organization. That's to the point that I was making earlier. You have to think about more innovative ways of job design, because the old way of structuring jobs, well, for certain businesses, that is way behind us, I would say.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that really concerns me. And Vivian, I want you to jump in on this too, and you as well, Jhon. That really concerns me, because as we're talking to our businesses, we're finding that some of our business owners are kind of old school, and they want people back in the office, and that's the way it is. And you know, when you start to have the conversation about, well, you know, what was productivity like? You know, could you have a hybrid? You know, the response is maybe, but I don't care. You know, like I really want them back in the office the way we were doing business before. And I worry about those companies because they will lose employees.
Yes.
And, you know, we really can see how there will be some businesses who, you know, survive the pandemic, but will not survive this labor shortage. And that's terrifying.
Do you have an idea for a small business? Maybe you're trying to grow a business that you've already started. Whatever the case, the Niagara Falls Small Business Enterprise Center is a community service that is here to help, offering entrepreneurs the tools to start and grow their businesses. The Small Business Enterprise Center is your one-stop for free business information and advice. Serving Niagara Falls and South Niagara, learn more about how we can help you and your business succeed at niagarafalls.ca/SBEC.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Vivian. I know
I agree with you. I agree with you, Dolores. And just to build on what Dave was saying there too, you know, there is a bit of material coming out in our consultancy reports, various surveys done by Canadian-wide business organizations, and they're saying exactly what you're saying. The companies that yes, they may really would love it if the office could go back to the way it was in February of 2020. But the reality on the ground is that isn't going to happen. So, you know, to answer your earlier question, no, I don't think there will be. I think the work and what it looks like has changed going forward. We won't get back to, there is a new normal coming. We're still working our way through that. But I think, you know, and to some of Dave's points, it is about asking the questions of, well, but I want everybody back in the office. It's why. Why do you want everybody back in the office? So what happened? Who's doing well, you know, working from home? Did their performance slip? Did you not meet your objectives as a business? Yes, a lot of the feedback that business owners give is, yeah, but I need my team together. I need my team to, you know, collect around the water cooler, so to speak, you know, but there is other ways of bringing people together, both remotely. And these are all the kind of human resource challenges that businesses will have. And the ones that get it will be the ones that are able to attract and retain talent. And the ones that don't, won't. And that it is kind of as blunt as that at the moment. And we're seeing it anecdotally, not necessarily seeing it in the data, although I was reading a survey the other day that there's not a lot of research on what employers are thinking. There's a lot on what employees are thinking. Mm-hmm. There's not very much yet emerged on what employers are thinking. But one thing I was looking at did point out that whereas 90% of employees, 90% in this survey said, yeah, I want some kind of hybridized work environment. I don't mind coming in the office, but I'm not coming in 5 days a week. Mm-hmm. And then, but only 60% of managers are saying, yeah, I can handle a hybridized work environment. So you've got this gap. You've got this gap in understanding between what employees are wanting. And I think our job is to kind of try and help support businesses to close that now, mm-hmm. right? So what can we do? When you look across Niagara, you know, 70% of businesses are, you know, have 10 employees or less, right? So really small businesses. So I can understand the challenges for some of those business owners, right? Where's the support for some of the HR that is required in this new world for them to thrive? And maybe we can all pull together as a community to have those conversations and provide that support.
For sure.
And I think that we need to shift that conversation to what opportunities does a new work environment bring to my business? Because we're continue talking about the issues that concerns the way of doing things in the past. And we will never go back to the way of doing things in the past. It may not be the way we're doing things right now, but we need to really understand really what part of the jobs of each specific person or responsibility can be done remotely, what needs to be done at the office, and redesigning the workflows, the processes to adjust to that. The opportunities that come with remote work and the ability to do hybrid work are financial, are access to new talent. They have given opportunity for other people that couldn't enter the workforce to participate. We are seeing a slight increase in participation rates across North America. So there is a lot of opportunity, but if we want to move forward and we want to be successful as businesses, we can't think that we have to go to the way we're doing things before.
Yeah.
Can I just add to that too? Those are great points, Jhon. I think also shifting the mindset away of the opportunity of allowing hybrid or remote actually could expand your talent pool, right? Because you don't have to live within quick commuting or even close commuting. Anecdotally, I'm even hearing stories right now in Niagara of, people sitting in their home office in St. Catharines or in Welland, working for companies based in Montreal, because because those companies have adopted remote working, and then they're searching for talent everywhere. So not only is our local talent pool in competition with our own local businesses, it's also in competition with Canada-wide businesses or even global businesses. So I think there's huge opportunities for businesses here in Niagara to say, okay, if I'm adopting some of these different practices and are happy to embrace some kind of hybridized work environment, then there is an opportunity to expand and diversify the talent that is working for them too.
So Jhon, I'm curious, in the work that you do with your clients, are they open to, as they're recruiting for new staff, like what are some of the things that they're maybe offering or looking at to entice new people to join their company? Can you share that?
Of course, there's been a huge move to review compensation practices. And I think that's been the main tool that a lot of companies have used to deal with these labor shortages. Also, they are expanding their networks. They're examining what can be done remotely as compared to what needs to be done at the office to see what kind of talent they can access beyond the borders of Niagara. And that's very important now. Our company mainly deals with manufacturing, specialized jobs that need specialized equipment that need to be done on location. That doesn't mean that they have not been untouched by the pandemic. They have experienced a different set of challenges, and that has required companies to review current policies, practices, processes, and offer more flexibility, because in order to retain those employees whose family responsibilities changed, whose life was turned upside down, they have to allow for certain things that they would have never thought they would in the past.
We had a conversation with a fairly large employer here in Niagara a few weeks ago, and they run a 24/7 operation. And as they're calling back employees are saying, we don't want to work that shift, and we'll take a substantial pay cut not to have to work that shift. And this business is, we're a 24/7 operation. We need to have people working those shifts, and it's not about paying you less. It's about having people when we need them, and they're really struggling with that. And I don't know, I don't know in a situation like that, like what can you do? We haven't talked about immigration at all.
Yeah.
Is that something that we need to look at? I know prior to the pandemic, foreign students, who were at the university and the college, filled a lot of the hospitality jobs. And then once they earned their diplomas and degrees, they would, get full-time positions. But our issue back then was that other provinces had a better path to citizenship. And so we would often lose them to other provinces, within the country. So any of you know what's happening with that immigration piece, and can that immigration piece be part of the solution with some of the jobs that we have?
I think you hit on a great point there, Dolores. On the immigration piece, absolutely yes. I think all the data show, and there's been lots of reports about it, that we need to be very welcoming of immigrants, not only for different skill sets that they bring, educational backgrounds that they've got, but also the ability to fill some of the in-demand jobs that we've got. And I know that at the provincial level, at the federal level, has got immigration targets that are the largest they've had in a very long time. And there's a lot of programs and support, both provincially and federally, for bringing immigrants to parts of Canada that are not in the big cities too. So, I mean, it's a huge opportunity for us in Niagara to welcome that diversity and bring folks here that can fill a lot of the job gaps that we've got. So we're all working on that, and we also work with our partners across the region in immigrant settlement services, who would then also work with employment services in general to get folks into our into local jobs. I think there's also been, even on the federal government is even considering widening migrant workers programs as well, in order to face some of these shortages. We normally see that in the agricultural sector, but there's other sectors that are maybe needing to be considered here too. Not sure if that's the right way to go personally, but there's definitely attention being paid to number one, we need newcomers to our communities, and number two, there's a lot of jobs for them to fill.
Yeah. I know both Dave and Jhon wanted to get in on this. So Dave, we'll go to you, and then we'll go to you, Jhon.
The thing is that I'm an immigrant myself. I'm going to take my oath of citizenship next week. And just thinking about the process itself, I mean, the thing is that, first of all, Canada is already doing a great job when it comes down to immigration. If you compare it to many other countries worldwide, we're doing a pretty good job in attracting people because we're an attractive country in the first place. But can we do a better job? Yes, because the thing is that the waiting times for people are, I mean, processing wise, and this is due to the pandemic as well. Like for some people, it takes up to 2 years to get their citizenship processed. Of course, they can get permanent resident status in the meanwhile, etc. But the thing is that if you could get this done much faster, you can process people much quicker, you can get people faster into the country. So the thing is, great country, great opportunities, but are we doing a good enough job at attracting international talent? I think we can do a better job at this. And I think that organization sectors have to sit together with governments at different levels to actually press that matter even more. You know, it's really crucial to get that foreign talent into the country, you know. And the thing is that if you just look at the healthcare sector, it's like nurses, doctors, etc. I mean, we're often bringing in people, and we're all familiar with this story from certain countries, but we don't recognize their skill set, like when it involves doctors, etc. And I've been doing research on that, like how many doctors, for example, end up being taxi drivers in Toronto, Montreal, etc. You're sitting in that cab, and then you hear, oh, this is someone with a PhD in physics or in medical science. And you're like, how is that possible that you're driving a taxi, you know? So I think that there's a need for a quicker process of certification so that people can fit in quicker and fill these gaps, you know? So definitely something that we have to work on in the future.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I mean, we've all heard those stories, and it's always such a head scratcher. Our chamber was involved with physician recruitment for years and years and years, and we still have a shortage. And when you hear about people driving cabs and they could be helping, in our hospitals, it just makes absolutely no sense. Jhon, I wanted to get you in on this conversation as well.
So I think that the federal government has very clear with their stance on immigration, and that it is part of the solution to the labor shortages that we have in Canada. As an immigrant myself, I see a lot of opportunity in immigration. I actually have had the opportunity to employ multiple people with multiple backgrounds in a very successful way in meaningful jobs where they can use their skills. Again, I see a disconnect within the programs that the government has in place, the opportunities that we have within the labor force to utilize that skill, and what the employers are doing. In the past, I've had challenges bringing in qualified employees to different positions because of that lack of credential, because of that lack of Canadian experience. We need to do a better job communicating to those decision makers, especially at the small business level, the advantages, the benefits, and the competitive edge that immigrant or internationally trained labor can bring into organizations. Not only because we're moving into a global economy, I mean, we're already in a global economy, we participate actively in it, but we are with this shifts that we talked about earlier, with technology, with adaptation of new tools, borders are disappearing. We really need to keep that in mind when we look at the opportunity that we have within the labor force. And I've worked with some employers that have seen that, and it's helped them with their labor challenges, but it's not the only answer either. I don't want anyone to think that their answer is immigration exclusively. I think that if we look at the main two things that we can do is develop the skill within our own companies, as well as bring in new talent from different backgrounds, talent that we couldn't or that we wouldn't look at before.
So I just, as you were talking, a question popped into my head. So in this new virtual world, someone could be working in Germany for a company here in Niagara. They don't have to go through the immigration process because they're not living here. So did we just remove some of those barriers because of the technology and this new world that we live in?
Some companies may have the opportunity to do that, some may not. We also need to understand that there are other challenges when you're doing offshore situations like this, I guess, that are not exclusive to talent or skill. Culture would be a significant challenge for a situation like that. Economics will be a significant challenge for a situation like that, because once we bring in a global economy, then the labor market gets affected significantly. And we've seen that in low-paying jobs that because of that have migrated to other areas. A lot of service roles have moved to the Philippines, have moved to India, have moved to places like now Central America. I've outsourced some of my IT work to South America because I have connections here in Colombia. So it is an opportunity to outsource some of those responsibilities, but it comes with challenges that businesses may not be ready to deal with. Immigration, on the other hand, allows us to bring talent that not only addresses the employment challenges that we have in Canada, but also other challenges that we have.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the big categories on our radio stations is actually running ads to help businesses find employees. And we just ran a campaign for a big manufacturer in Niagara. They held an open house at a local hotel. And I was speaking to the HR manager last week, and she was very happy. She actually found 2 or 3 people. Now, I thought 2 or 3 was kind of low, but she said, she's been looking to fill these positions for quite some time. Toyota advertised with us at another market. They have a plant, and it's interesting. Their advertising messaging is actually trying to reach all kinds of people. They actually talk in their ad about how many languages their supervisors speak, and they're trying different things to try and identify what really is a very specialized skill set, and are having great success. So I guess the thing I wanted to ask, we've got three really smart experts here. What are the two things you would recommend small business employers do to actually attract people? And Vivian, can I start with you?
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. I think number one would be to review your culture and approach to your staff engagement, your HR policies and procedures, and see if there's a way in which you can rethink to meet the larger needs of employees. And then the second point would also be, it kind of follows the first two, is this whole point on inclusivity, what you were just talking about there, Chris, what Jhon was talking about. Those are terrific points, because employers need to be of a mindset to be far more inclusive, think outside the box than what they're used to doing in terms of hiring, and be willing to be far more flexible and engage with employees in different ways. And I think there's a lot of supports that they could get from the chamber, and other organizations across the region.
Okay, Dave, what are your thoughts?
A couple of things. So first of all, building more diverse workplaces, because if you build more diverse workplaces, you will attract new talent, right? Then I would focus also on one of the points that Vivian was mentioning, like if you want to attract and retain people, I think that you have to focus more on communicating culture, making sure that culture becomes also part of the employee's DNA. You can communicate values, etc., but people also have to start to live those values. And I think you have to really focus on building culture through attracting the right people, but also making sure that people feel connected to the organization. And that's going to be a big challenge when it's remote work, of course, but there are different ways to achieve that. Focus more on mental well-being of your employees and family, because this is another thing that we didn't touch on so much, but I think that employees attach more and more importance to their well-being. So take care of employees and their families, because we're the week of mental well-being. So I think this is really an important topic that HR should think about as well. Embrace that flexibility, listen to your employees in terms of, the thing is, some people actually do want to come back to work as well, because if you have kids like 3-4-year-olds, and the thing is, if you have to work from home, you might not always have your office. So the thing is, there's definitely a certain group of people who want to come back. So that's what I mean by flexibility. Use data from your people to make your decisions, and be flexible in using that opportunity. And also add, if you have the option, try to incentivize loyalty. If you want people to stay, it makes sense to actually reward loyalty. So these are a couple of things that I would have in mind to attract and retain people.
Before we go to Jhon, you said something, old school is the customer's always right. You take care of the customer, you do everything to make sure that the customer is happy. But the mind shift really has to be, take care of your employees, make sure your employees are happy. So that's a really good point that you make. And
well, there's plenty of data out there that shows that if you have an engaged, committed employee, they're willing to go that extra mile, right? Sure. And that's what you're looking for in your businesses. And if you don't have committed employees, it's very hard to make sure that they're going after that new customer, right? So
yeah. And there's other data that says if you've got a really well-engaged employees, you have happy customers.
There are a lot of things that we can do to attract and retain talent. When it comes to attracting talent, we need to look at the way in which we communicate experiences rather than just jobs. And I see companies continue to invest in the communication of job opportunities rather than the actual experience of working with your company. And it goes to what Dave was talking about culture, about values, about living those. But how am I going to get people outside my organization to understand what those things are if I'm not telling them about it? And companies are starting to do that, and they're learning to do it, but it's still not a common practice to talk about the stories, to talk about what it really is to work for my company beyond the job description, beyond the wage. And if we do that, we are going to be more successful at attracting talent. Now, when we look at retaining talent, expectations from employees have shifted. And employees want their employers to be more involved in aspects of their life beyond employment. They all want employers to participate or to be part of their social safety net, providing services for mental health. Mental health is very, very important, allowing for balance within their work and their life. And there are different ways to do that, like reevaluating vacation or absenteeism policies, like not necessarily creating an exclusively remote office or an exclusively in-place office, but having that flexibility that allows to meet different people's needs and expectations. I could go hours talking about what we can do to attract and retain employees. That's what we do at my company on a daily basis for a variety of clients. But when we look at the main two things, let's tell people what we are. Let's give people a reason to come and ask me or ask me why they would want to work with me.
Yeah, you've just given me a great idea for a workshop for our members, because I think, a lot of them would tune in for something like that. So, Jhon, I'll be in touch. I know we're running out of time, but I just remembered I had read something somewhere, and Vivian, you might have some data on this, or Dave, you might too, or Jhon, you as well. I'd read that younger people in the workforce were actually more eager to be in the office than older people. And the reason they said that was because older people had already an established network. So working virtually, you could connect with people easily because you had already developed those relationships. But for young people who were just starting out in their careers, working virtually didn't provide them with the same opportunities to get connected, to meet people, to see, additional opportunities within their workplace. And initially that surprised me, because I thought, older people might be more inclined to go back to the office because that's what they've always known, and younger people might not. But this article that I read and the stats were the other way around. Any input on that? Did I read that right? Did anybody else see that?
From my perspective, I think, I don't know if I saw exactly the same survey or report that you're referencing there, Dolores, but I think, yes, that could be the case. But I think there's similar research and surveys coming out that tell a different story as well. So I think in general, it's back to kind of Dave and Jhon's points about it needs to be human-centered. It is around what particular employees in any particular organization, where they're at. And it could be, yes, the person with the 2-year-old at home can't wait to be in the office because that's the only time they get the space to be productive. And that's great. But making it human-centered. And I would say, because there's a lot of research around youth and their expectations, or younger employees and their expectations. And it will come back to what Jhon and Dave have been talking about. They may want to be in the office, but only in an organization that values them, that they align with respect to their culture, and which shares and attracts them to want to not only work with them, but stay with them. They won't stay in an office that they don't find that alignment with. And all the research is showing that. And with the labor market the way it is right now, the younger generation too are, for a long time now, the stats have shown that they find it quite easy to move from one organization to the other. It's just the way they operate. They find it no problem at all, unlike the older generation. So I think there's probably a grain of truth in what you read there, Dolores, but I don't think it's as straightforward a story. And I would always come back to what Dave and Jhon were so eloquently talking about, which is that the culture of the workplace, the value that employees have, and how they're valued will be the sticking point.
Yeah, great point.
I would also like to add that we're only talking about 30% of jobs that can be done remotely in North America. So we still need to have the majority of our workforce in place somewhere to support different operations. Now, of course, it doesn't apply to other organizations. Some businesses can completely work remotely, and they are doing that. Some businesses that could work remotely are not doing that, and they're being successful. So there are different aspects to keep in mind. We need to understand that there isn't a solution that will fit every business, regardless of who they are. What we need to understand is that there needs to be flexibility, but we cannot neglect the conversation about the 70% of employees that need to be in place, and the accommodations that they need, and the flexibility that they need for our companies to be successful in this current employment market.
Well, Vivian, Dave, and Jhon, this was incredible. Thank you so much. Some great insights here this morning. Thank you very much for being part of the podcast.
Thank you.
Dolores, what's planned for next week?
Well, next week, we're kind of going to keep this conversation going. We're going to take a look at the trades. We're going to discuss why we have such a shortage and what we need to do right now to ensure a healthy trades workforce moving forward. Joining us for the conversation will be Marco Magazzini and Anthony Corzato from the Niagara Catholic District School Board. They're doing some great work around this. And Rich DiPietro from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. To all of our listeners, send us the topics that you're talking about, because we want to talk about them too. Thanks for tuning in, and have yourselves a wonderful day.